Hello to my fellow classmates in the English content cohort and Ayana Taylor, my content mentor. I look forward to getting to know all of you and working with you on developing myself to be an English teacher, which has always been my favorite subject and one that has come so naturally to me throughout my grade school years and well into college. Um, when it comes to my own history with literacy, language, and English, there's a few memories that really stood out to me when I began to reflect on my past. There's also a really major point that I had noticed that I think is especially applicable to future generations that I think are useful understanding from the perspective of a teacher. As I had stated, English was always a subject that came naturally to me, and I particularly enjoyed writing for the way that it enabled me to express myself. Writing in particular is something that I consider an art form, whether it's a computer screen you're typing on or a piece of loose leaf that you're writing. I look at it almost as if it's a canvas for ideas. As I've read over things that I've written, I'm able to get a clearer sense of even what I'm trying to say better. I'm able to elaborate on certain points I want to make, and I'm able to get a feeling for the way the words move through me and the images that they can create. One of my earliest experiences that I think are worth noting in grade school occurred in the fourth grade when we were practicing writing poetry. Um, my teacher had just mentioned what a thesaurus is and what it is useful for, but didn't necessarily require us to use it. She sort of just mentioned where it was in the class. I remember I was writing a poem on my newborn baby sister, and I picked up the thesaurus and began kind of transcribing simpler words into more complex ones that were less common. For example, I remember replacing the word soft with dainty. I ended up with a really well written poem, especially for a fourth grader, and I was very proud of it. I began employing this strategy throughout the rest of my schooling, and I ended up expanding my vocabulary tremendously, which I believe is useful not only to develop a sophisticated style of language usage, but to have more descriptive ways to say simpler things. It was almost a way to paint the moments and concepts I would describe more vividly. One teacher who really stood out to me was my sophomore English teacher who gave us the guidelines. He called it the guidelines to writing a perfect essay. He basically gave us a template for how to plug in and organize information, and he told us that we would be using this well into our college years, and he was actually correct. I still use that format today, and it's something I hope to pass down to my future students. He showed us exactly how to make a thesis statement and an introduction, a conclusion, and this helped me in my ability to organize information and make it coherent, which is another beautiful thing that I think literacy is capable of doing. It can help you sort of, structure your ideas, understand sort of a systematic way of explaining things, and so, as far as reading, um, I would read for enjoyment at times, especially in late middle school, early high school. I remember I loved reading mystery books. One of my favorite books, I think, was A Child Called It because of the perspective that it put me in and the way I was able to understand someone else's intense experiences, which is always, I think, one of the more, commonly known beauty of loving reading is that you're able to put yourself in someone else's perspective, be in a different set of shoes. But, however, I have memories of myself at a young age kind of forcing myself to read books for school and kind of drilling every single word into my brain, but not really understanding it because of the lack of personal motivation that I had. For example, I remember one summer for a summer reading, I read the biography of George W. Bush because it was one of the books on the reading list. I remember just sitting there at my grandmother's house and reading every single word, but like I said, not understanding one thing. And I think that says a lot about how important student engagement and student choices when it comes to literacy. So as I got older, what I did, while I did read most of the books that were required of me in high school, a lot of my literacy development actually took place outside of the classroom. I remember around my sophomore year of high school, I received my first laptop, and whenever I was home, I would lock my bedroom door and I would sit on it and read things on the internet. And so what happened was I began reading things that were more pertinent to personal interests I had and problems I faced and just things that I was curious about the world. For example, I would read these beautifully well written, well researched articles on psychology if I felt I was going through a certain kind of issue. And I think with the rise of social media, I began reading and producing these beautiful poems that were shared that were so well written and stuck out to me throughout the years, like on platforms such as Tumblr. I also began to get heavily involved in creative writing, but in a more personal sense. Some intense experiences I would have that I just wanted to, get out of my brain and onto a canvas of some sort where I can read it over and reflect on my moments and recreate them, give them a new sense of life. Um, as I began to, as I sat here for this assignment and reflected on my literacy history, this really stood out to me because digital literacies are becoming only more prominent as the times progress, and the digital world is only more embedded every day into the youth who are growing up currently right now. I believe pretty strongly that there's a literacy associated with reading articles on Facebook or even social media, or even sending a text message. I actually designed a lesson plan around digital literacies for one of my graduate courses during my final semester of undergraduate in teaching English as a new language a few months back. And I think that it combined the effect of, student engagement and student selected topics while sort of like honing and developing literacy skills simultaneously. I think there's also a level of deception of things on the internet that I think is becoming more and more important for us to prepare our youth to exercise discernment with. What I did notice, however, was that I was becoming more accustomed to reading things on the internet and selecting pieces of literature that I wanted to read. My attention span grew a little shorter. So, for example, instead of reading novels, I would read a lot more short stories, which are my favorite, as a matter of fact. Currently, I love reading short stories, and I am the type of person these days who will kind of just. I enjoy picking up something, reading a few pages, getting what I want from it or getting what I need out of it, and kind of putting it down, which I think has some sort of might have some correlation with my usage of the internet to do research and read and write. Um, Maybe my hunger for instant gratification grew stronger. I think there's some benefits and weaknesses to it that I'll save for another day because it seems I'm actually going a bit over on time. So, overall, in general, literacy has truly been one of the focal points of my development of character, cultivation of mind. It's transformed my view on the world greater than I think any other factor there is. It breaks down barriers of isolation and helps me to think beyond the confines of the mind. And I'm so excited to grow as a teacher and instill the same value in literacy, or attempt to at least give them one piece of it, instill the same value in literacy as in my future students. So, thank you.